Okay, it's April 5th, and we're at Pinehurst Raceway with Doug Ackerman and Harry Pinal. And we're very excited to have these two very prominent horsemen here for a Cracker Barrel session. First, we're going to start with Doug Ackerman. He's going to tell us a little bit about himself.
Well, not a whole lot to tell. I was born in LaPorte, Indiana, and raised up in southern Michigan. And my first person I ever worked for was my father, and that was the only one I ever worked for, and with my brother. And we went on through racing the rest of our life, both of us. And, I don't know what else to tell you. I worked for my dad, that was it, and that was good enough.
You had public stable, right?
Thank you, Doug.
What?
I said thank you. Okay, that's good. Harry?
Harry Pownall, I was born in Mineola, Long Island. Grew up in the Mineola Fairgrounds. The first job I had was selling programs at the matinees at the fairgrounds. And later on, I went to work for my uncle, rubbing horses as a groom, and I thought I could get an education, become a veterinarian, but I didn't think I qualified. So after I guess a year or so of summer and winter and night and day going to school, making up credits, things like that, I finally took a summer off and I went to work for Delvin Miller, rubbing horses. And when school started, I was still in Lexington, Kentucky, having a good time. So after that, when I was working for Delvin, when we got up to New York, Eddie Cobb gave me my first mount at Yonkers Raceway. When my dad heard that, I don't know if he got jealous or what, but he sent me up to Saratoga with the second string, and that's where I broke my maiden up there. And well, it's been the same just about ever since. Like Doug, I had a public stable, which means you have various owners, not one owner that owns the whole stable. So I raced mainly at Yonkers and Roosevelt. It was tough competition, but those were in the days where you could make a living with overnight horses. I mean, as against, you really need a stake horse today to survive, right? Yeah. So anyway, I had a good life in the horse business, met a lot of wonderful people and traveled, been to race in Canada, California, Ohio, Kentucky, so it was very broadening, educational in that respect. And I don't know, I guess maybe it might have been a little easier for me, having grown up on the back stretch, you might say, with the characters of people and things like that, which I really enjoyed. It was almost like the circus, only we didn't have to yell "Rube" or anything like that when somebody's kid got in trouble. And I remember the first time I used to stick into the Hall of Fame with my buddy. Mr. Kane lived in that upstairs apartment. He had I think a Filipino chauffeur that was his valet, his chef, and everything else, but he would entertain his guests down there out on the lawn. And of course, the museum was spotless, the stalls were cleaned out. We'd go in there and look around, we heard footsteps, we'd hide in one of the stalls, and then We didn't do any damage or anything like that, but that was my first association with what is now the Hall of Fame. But it's been a good life, it's been a healthy life. It's, there's nothing wrong with the horse business. As I said, that winning a race doesn't cure. I don't know what else I can tell you. I never had any great horses. I had fairly good overnight horses. And,
You
made
can
a-
make a lot of money with a good horse today.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can't with the average horse, though. They just don't cut the mustard. They don't get a race. It's nice to have an average horse, but they don't get much money for you. You know? I've had a lot of them, average ones.
I guess we first met in, was it Lexington before we went to Hollywood Park? Or
Yeah,
was it Hollywood? Yeah. That would be about 1955, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah. And,
I never raced a stable at Roosevelt. I had one or two horses in there often, different times, but not a whole stable. I never did very good, only with Albuquerque. She did win a couple races there. But, I probably shouldn't say this. When I first went there in the 40s, I thought the management was the meanest people in the world. I don't know, maybe it was just me. Probably was, but the race secretary, the judges, and whatever, they just never had a nice word for anybody. I didn't think. Probably did, but it wasn't me. And
Doug was quite a handicapper too.
shut that off a minute and I'll tell you a funny story.
Horseman that couldn't make a statement without at least one four-letter word in it.
That's right.
They've all been quite good around us this weekend. We're
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
but we don't mind one bit.
No, we've heard them all before, we use them sometimes.
Yes.
That's right.
They didn't forget. Your father insisted on turning it off.
So I moved a little closer so that I could get a little bit better sound with the mic. But so maybe you guys could share with us now some of your maybe what you consider your top moments in harness racing.
You had more of them than I did. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know. Not every time you win a big race, you step up a high moment. Albuquerque probably gave me more. Albuquerque and Chocolatier gave me more high points than anybody. They were both good horses. And old Albuquerque was really good. She's a damn Hattie, you know. And she was really a great mare. And so was Hattie was okay. Hattie was a better broodmare than she was a race mare. But I shouldn't have sold Hattie, but I had a full sister to her that could beat her, but she couldn't beat her in the broodmare barn. And I thought she could. She was a better looking mare and everything, but she never produced like, first coat was a good one, and then that was about all. Beat it out after that. But I did have quite a few big horses, thanks to Mr. Staley. He would send me to say, "Oh, just go buy some horses, Doug." That's all he did. He said, "Never what kind or which ones." But he was a fine owner, and I don't think anybody ever has had one as good or will ever have another one. We never had a crossword in 27 years. That's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
It shows a lot to or speaks to the respect that the owners had for their trainers, that they paid the bills, and certainly they had a place in the decision making, but they let the trainers really make the horse related decisions. Have you seen where that's changed a little?
Oh, quite a lot.
But there were a few owners that stayed with a trainer for long times. A
And
lot
through
of them
thick
would
and
switch
thin.
around. Somebody would tell them, get a hold of them up in the clubhouse and tell them
Yeah,
about somebody else could improve that horse. But dedicated owners were few and far between, I would say. Would
oh
you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So As
Mr.
Doug
Staley was
said-
one of them though.
he was lucky to have one of them. And,
You know, lots of good horses, Denali and Noble Hustle, Noble Traveler, and lots more I can't think of right the minute.
Yeah, happy chatter.
He really he didn't come around a lot, but he really enjoyed his horses, and not near as much as I did, but I enjoyed his horses more than he did. But
oh, he had a private stable, didn't he?
yeah,
Yeah.
but I didn't call it a private stable. As far as I was concerned, it was private. And he was a fine man.
What's the fastest trip you ever took on a racetrack?
52.
Really? I think I went in 2 minutes once out in California. That was about it. But back then, 2 minutes was a pretty good mile. But
Oh yeah.
but if I went that fast today, I wouldn't have the
Well, I'd
time
fly
to look at my watch.
I'd fly off the seat. In fact, I flew off twice already this year.
Yeah. Pretty soft track, isn't it? Good cushion.
Wasn't bad. I went into Roosevelt with Albaquil in the spring, and she won the sheep race with her. It was a 3-year-old filly pace, but I went. I never went back till the last day of racing. And what's his name? Regal had 3 diamonds there. This was quite a race to win. And all the good mare 3-year-old fillies in the nation were in there. I think I drew it 5th or 6th, I forget. I didn't figure to win the race, but 3 diamonds had the 2nd or 3rd. And they cut a big trail down there. And I pulled her over around the 3/4 pole and I just whizzed him. And I felt good about that, but not as good as I should have, because she would have been, 3 diamonds would have been horse of the year if I hadn't beat her. But and I felt a little bit bad about that, but I got over it. What, are you going to tell them the story about Funday or not?
No, 'cause you might want to tell it, but
Well, yeah.
I think we better leave that alone.
No, I don't think that'll hurt anything. Pouring rain. Funny wore a hat, went around like that. Looked different than everybody else. Well, he was different than everybody else. But Hector Chief kicked him out that night and was running away. And it was one of them hot, sultry nights in Detroit, Hazel Park. I know you've all been to Hazel Park, how close it is to the racetrack. And so Hector's running away and they caught him, and the damn guy at the gate got excited and turned him loose. And he's madder than hell, and here he comes walking down through the rain. Everything went plumb quiet. Some old colored lady down there says, "Don't worry, Mr. Thunderwork, we know you try all the time." Lady says, "You're the whitest son of a bitch out there."
In that grandstand, yeah.
You could just hear it the whole grandstand.
This is Thunderberg, right?
Thunderberg.
Thunderberg.
Yeah.
I can't think of his first name. Yeah.
Yeah, he says, "Lady, you're the whitest son of a bitch."
Yeah. Yes, there've been a lot of expressions like that.
So tell us maybe a little bit about your experience with Roosevelt Raceway, and you know, any times that you've raced there, and you know, how it was for you at the time. It was considered, you know, the Mecca. All the greats raced there. So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I like I say, I just took 1 or 2 horses in there at the time, but I really liked to go there with the round where it was circled like that and that. It was really nice, or I thought anyway, compared to where we've been racing. And the only thing I just said a minute ago, I thought the judges and all that were very, very nasty to young white kids. Maybe not, maybe it was just me, but I'd never been away from the farm before. Nobody ever hollered at me. And, but they did there. But I won a couple races there, and Albuquerque did. That was about it. Nothing big. I liked to go there though. It was a nice place. I liked it, even if they did holler at me. Didn't you like it there, Harry?
Oh, I guess I saw Roosevelt grow from before they even had the barns built.
No, yeah.
They used to ship horses from Mineola to the fairgrounds, and then they got each barn built. And the stable area was perfect the way it was laid out
Wasn't it though?
in the circle. But as I said, I did most of my racing there, and my only claim to fame would be I guess I won the Daily Double one night, and that would be it. I did win a stake race when I drove one of Delvin's horses. Can't think of his name right now, but it was a good place to race, and
Well, it was way ahead of all other tracks at that time.
sir.
It was way ahead of all the other tracks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was. And then they took down the old grandstand, and then put up the new one, and the opening night they didn't tell anybody, but they set off fireworks. Fireworks. They sound like cannons, and scared the hell out of the guys up in the what do you call it? The officials watching the
Yeah.
race. Yeah. And the horses that had on the track, Jesus, they were rearing up and wanted to run away. I mean loud. Boy. But that was opening night, and I think that's when Speedy picked what's his name's horse won that race that night, and
Harry
established the
Fitzpatrick, Charlie.
the track record for a while. But it had 2 tracks, had a training track, and it had a jog track down in the hollow, we called it.
Training track was good.
Yeah. And they had, you know, four tack rooms in the barns for the grooms. It was pretty spacious, and was when they started opening up early in the spring, everybody had to have a heater in there. And Roosevelt was pretty comfortable place. You had a good, fairly
Good
good
class place.
track kitchen and that.
And the track kitchen was wonderful.
They saw a lot of them come and go. The best track kitchen I ever was in was Hollywood Park.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it was. And Hazel Park wasn't bad.
No, it got bad, but it wasn't bad then when
Yeah,
you were there.
no.
Hollywood Park had a lot of good things in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your experiences at Hollywood Park, Doug.
Oh, I had good stable horses back then. Won a lot of races and was a very close friend with Press Genuine, which didn't hurt anything, probably. But I did good there, and the track was so good always, and feed and everything was perfect. And I won some races there, good races. 3-year-old trot, and 3-year-old pace. Albuquerque won a bunch of races there. And Denali, he won. I'll never forget Denali. Dougie drove him that night. But he won, I don't know, 54, 4, 55. And he sat right on the outside of Royce and beat him. The next day I got a call. Guy wanted to buy Denali for $100,000. I said, well, why don't you go try to buy Royce? He said, they want $4 million for him. And they got it. And Denali beat his brains out the night before.
When I first went out there, I won my first 2 races. And Doug and I were walking back from the paddock to the stable area, and he says, well, Harry, you can win them all now. Well, that didn't last long, that's for sure. But you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I'd been in the winner's circle with Lucy
Yeah.
and Vivian. No, what's her?
Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance from I Love Lucy.
Yeah, and quite a few actors. We had one come in there, what was his name, Gene Williams or something like that. He was married to the woman that played, what's his name, secretary. Well, anyway, he he was there before they got up on the platform. He says, what am I supposed to do next? Well, he said, what am I supposed to do? So somebody back him, he said, do you know a soft shoe? To do a dance for the public. You know how they made the presentations and all that. What the hell was his name? But Charlie Coburn, he was very popular with the troops out there, and
Rochester.
Rochester, and you saw who played the gangster all the time.
Sheldon Leonard.
Huh?
Sheldon Leonard.
No, well, yeah. The guy that was, who?
George Raft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he looked like he was playing his part in the movie all the time. He stood up, you know, between the aisles and smoked a cigarette.
Mickey Rooney was in most of it.
What's his name was there all the time, that little runt.
Who? Oh, Mickey Rooney?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, he got along, I've noticed him in different horse pictures. He got along good with horses.
Yeah.
You know, he played a jockey, I think,
Yeah.
a couple of times. And he wasn't at, and of course he was in that thing with Elizabeth Taylor, that classical movie.
National Velvet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Charlie Coburn, he came from, I think, South Carolina, as he told us one night, having dinner. He said he rode a mule delivering mail. And he didn't make his first movie till he was in his 60s. And from then on, he made about 2 or 3 a year. He says, I can get by, live pretty good making 1 movie a year. He says, but in this business, you got to stay in front of the public. But, he told some pretty jokes that isn't suitable for this show here.
They had some good horses there then, Chris.
Monocle Man and
Well, he didn't have such good ones, but there was a lot of good ones at Hollywood Park.
oh yeah.
Yeah. All the good horses in the United States came there in the fall.
After Lexington?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then after Roosevelt and Walter started going late, kind of took it away. But before that, they all came there. Adios, Butler, and
Oh yeah.
Eddie Cobb liked it there too. He stapled
yeah.
there every winter, didn't he?
yeah, he was at Tatterstedt.
Eddie Carver.
Delmar.
Eddie,
Oh, Delmar, right.
Yeah. Yeah, he was there, Eddie, and, oh hell, I can't think of all the guy, Harry Fitzpatrick, and his dad came out there one night with Star's Pride. He was in front going the first turn, and the bit broke.
no, excuse me, Doug, that was Florida.
Florkin, was it?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Florkin, the bit broke. And he went right back through the field running.
Hold on to the,
And all of a sudden he hit back trot, zoom, went right to the front again and won the race. Yeah, he could trot faster than he could run.
he won the race, but they set him down because
Oh yeah,
they claimed it was a gaining break.
you know,
I don't know.
it
but-
wasn't, but
Yeah.
they all pulled all the way from the rail and let him through both times,
Mm.
coming back and going forward.
He was I trained him a couple of times with my dad when he left him at Roosevelt or something like that prior to a race, but you couldn't take the lines and go like this up on his back or hit fire. Yeah. As long as you left him on the side, he was all right.
Cut.
Hamiltonian, when he won with
Walter
Walter
Deere.
Deere.
Yeah.
And, what's his,
What can you tell us about Walter Cox?
well, he, there was the right way, the wrong way, and Walter Cox's way, and that was it. And he ran an immaculate stable. He had good help. Old Bill Pence and a couple of the others that used to work for him. He came down from New Hampshire, and he had a brother who was I don't know, big in politics. Whether he was the attorney general, he was a lawyer and whatnot. But Cox worked as a butcher before he really got into training horses. You probably know all this at the Hall of Fame. Well, Cox, kids in those days used to go to the butcher shop and get a pig's bladder, you know, and blow it up and use it for a balloon. Well, that was still in the horse and buggy days. And they used to take it and tie it under the girth of somebody's horse. And if they didn't notice it and got in their carriage to drive off, the horse, you know, would raise hell when they got to it. Well, anyway, they did that to one of Cox's horses up in New Hampshire. And he saw it when he came out, but pretended he didn't see it. He knew his horse, and he got him there. And he drove the horse down through town, you know, to his home, wherever he was going, to the track. And somebody went up to him, he says, "What's that?" He said, what was that you were doing with that horse? Oh, he said, the son of a bitch was getting to his elbows. He says, "This straight to us." He said the next day, there's about a half a dozen horses with the balloons, the pig bladders under there. Yeah. Somebody was looking for a second trainer, you know, Carl Dill worked for him, Johnny Dill's father, and all of a sudden he let Carl go, and it was Carl who went to somebody else, one of Henry Thomas's owners, and told him about McGlynn, how well he was training and everything, and they bought him out from under Cox, you know. And Henry Thomas won the Hamiltonian with him in '38. So I forgot my point here, but anyway, he what was it? Put a commercial in.
So we've seen the breed improve dramatically over the last
Oh,
half a century.
tremendously.
Tremendously. What can you tell us about your observations as to, you know, maybe some of the changes that have improved and maybe some of the changes that were unintended consequences of the breeding closely?
I don't know if there was any unintended. It's been quite a study, that breeding, and it works. You don't think so? Look at George Siegel outfit and those other ones, but he's very successful breeding. And I'm not very good at it. I just kind of poke around and had bred some nice horses, but and I always bred to a nice horse. He didn't always cross up good, so consequently I didn't have a good horse as I should have. But it's quite a science, breeding, I think.
My father told me when he was rubbing horses as a kid, he says that it wouldn't be unusual for a trainer to have different weight shoes on each foot to get them gaited. In fact, them starting out breaking yearling trotters, you all started out with toe weights and hinge quarter boots and things like that. And now they come right off the farm and can trot and, you know, pretty good clip without anything on them. So the gait has certainly, you know, taken over tremendously, I think.
Oh yeah, it's nothing to it anymore.
No, you don't see as many yearlings with splints anymore.
No,
And you don't see any of those old Roman nose horses that all seem to be bullheads
Peter Brewer.
one time, right? Huh?
Peter the Brewer.
Yeah, that's right, Peter the Brewer. But you saw a lot of those horses which had a nose on them like a camel. Yeah.
Now, there was some discussion earlier about the hardiness, say, of the horses now as compared to in the past, that maybe they're a little less rugged now. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, you back them up from 51 to 211, and I think these horses would be just as hardy. The speed is what makes them collapse. I don't think there's that much difference myself. Just
Well-
slow them down, that's all. If that's what you want.
Well, they're not going as many heats as
No.
they used to either. Yeah.
But they could go more if they only went in 212 instead of
Yeah.
50 and a fifth or something. Drive them from wire to wire. No, I don't know about that, Chris. Oh, I'm sure they're a little tougher, I don't know.
Well, this breed is getting more and more like the thoroughbreds. The horses even beginning to look more like them.
Well, and they're
More
racing them more
refined.
like it.
Hmm?
They race them like it.
Oh yeah,
8,
you
10,
take
12.
Tar Heel. He looked more like a Morgan horse than
Yeah.
he did a racehorse. They were blocky and you know, short coupled, so to speak.
So, do you feel that some of these horses where the speed comes so naturally that they maybe don't need as much of the drilling that they used to get?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
There was some horses in the past that just stood out. You know, they were just different, like Speedster, not wearing anything. Finally, one day he come out and he either put bell boots on the horse or scalpers behind. Nothing else. What was his name? Smith. What was his first name?
Smith.
Like, he was Lee Smith's brother. He won the Hamiltonian with Bill Gallen. Anyway, somebody said, what do you put them on for? Oh, he says, I had to put something on them. His sons of bitches were all talking about me. Scalpers or bell boots. But he was a great trotter, and that horse there helped cement Bill Brown's job at Castleton.
Yeah.
He went out on a limb and told him to get that horse. that was his first year
Mm-hmm.
with Castleton, and he proved a winner.
Yep.
But Bill told me, he says I had to like him because all the horsemen liked him, you know. He says he was a natural gaited son of a gun like him. He was a good seller. How many Hamiltonian winners did he have?
Oh, I don't know.
But,
Oh, the breeding has got so much better today. Not even close. Probably the biggest improvement of all.
yeah, I guess that would be it.
That and the wheel disc.
The wheel disc. So you've seen a lot of race bikes, speaking of wheel discs, come and go. You know, we went with the old, obviously the wooden
I
You
would
know,
like to. I would like
conventional
to see.
sulkies.
I would like to see one of our top trotters hooked up to an old, good wooden out in favor sulky, the way it should be hooked up. They'd hook those. You look at those old pictures. Those sulkies were like this. If you took them out of the turrets, they'd go over backwards. There was no weight on the horse, right? Yeah. I'd like to see one of those horses go a time trial in one of those and see how much difference there is.
I'll tell you what.
Years ago, you saw guys hooking up horses to race into sulkies. These Johnny-come-latelys, they looked like they were hooked to a hay rake. You know, the shafts would be all right. Some of those characters. Excuse me, Doug.
You were gonna say, Doug?
Oh yeah, the sulky that the UST barred, that was the fastest sulky that ever was made. That's cheetah. Horses could go so fast to that. I don't know why, but it pulled better, and everything about it was better. I don't know why they stopped
What
it.
sulky was that?
Cheetah. Put your feet right up behind the horse.
Oh,
It was good. It wasn't uncomfortable at all. Might have strung the race out just a little, but today's sulkies string the race out too. They're way back there.
Because the drivers are leaning way back,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, they take up two positions.
But that cheetah was a good sulky.
What about the single shaft?
Oh my goodness. That single shaft, it could go faster than the cheetah, but it was more dangerous than a rattlesnake. I was racing one for Lloyd Arnold in the Michigan Fairs. And Bob Stansel and I were going to Allegan. And his horse got lame. He had one of them single shafts. Well, I didn't know nothing about him. He said, hook to my sulky. I said, okay. So I did, and I've been finishing 4th or 5th every week. We raced every week the same horses. And I just draw it away from them. So the next week, I had her at Centerville, and I didn't go, and I let Chris Boring drive her to a natural sulky. She finished 4th. And come to Hillsdale, and I borrowed Stansel's single shaft. We're going around the last turn, and I'm trying to make the front. Well, I was going to make it. I don't know what happened. I hooked into Glenn Quick's wheel, and down we went. Sulkies all over the racetrack, and the horse, I don't even know what happened. You couldn't tell where you were going back there. But they could pull it fast. Really fast. They didn't need no gate and straps. They didn't need anything. Just go.
Because they were a little freer, maybe?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Yeah, oh, they could go.
What made them so dangerous? The
Couldn't-
visibility?
You couldn't guide them.
Oh, you couldn't guide them. So they didn't track well since it was a single
Yeah.
position?
And they'd get off the side like that all of a sudden, or this way.
Okay, we're back. We're going to talk about the farm manager. His previous position was at Blue Chip, but he was also at Castleton Farm, Mr. William Brown.
Came from Ohio, from, what the hell's the name of that town in Ohio? The same name as that baloney, what do you call it?
Lebanon.
Lebanon.
Lebanon, yeah. And he was tough to work for,
Oh,
but
Oh, he was good.
but he was right. And it's a wonder it's a wonder he never got paralyzed and lost his right arm for shaking hands and taking his hat off.
Yeah.
Put his hat on, take his hat to sales. And if the guy had his wife with him or even his mother, they'd get kissed, right?
Oh, yeah. He was a,
But he ran a tough, good
yeah,
stable.
he was a fine guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he had a lot of principle. And I always said he could talk to anybody in the paddock, in the track kitchen, and in the clubhouse. He
Yeah.
could talk above himself and make him understood when he talked below himself. And his wife deserves a lot of credit, Lydia.
Yeah.
In fact, I had a trophy made down here. I can't even recall what we put on it and sent it up to her after he got his award at the Hall of Fame. We sent one up, a plaque, I guess it was. Behind every great man is a woman. And I even drew a collage of paintings of what Lydia had to do. He'd have people come to the farm. He'd love to show the farm off. And poor Lydia, she got quite lame after years of bad feet with plantar's warts and so forth. And she'd just be rested and having a cigarette and a drink and watching the 5 o'clock news, and he'd come in the doorway with about 3 potential customers. She'd have to feed them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And lo and behold, in any barn there, if there was this piece of straw and a rake or a pitchfork, he'd spot it. So I was doing the shoeing up there several times and trimming. I'd purposely I told the kids, I'd say, watch this. Think he doesn't have good eyesight? I'd put that on a rake. Sure as shooting, he'd see that and take it off the wall. And
He wasn't a great race driver, but he was a good horse trainer.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good all-around horseman too.
Oh, he was. Oh, yeah, yeah. He worked for good people too. You know, he worked
Yeah.
for. He came out with Doc. What was his name? Doc. Is it
He lived in Ohio.
Oh, out there in Ohio, and then he went to work for. I met him. I was tending bar at Lee's Hotel, which was right across the track, the road on South Street, from the head of the stretch. That used to be Egan's barn right in there. A lot of grooms used to eat at Lee's Hotel. Well, I'd just gotten out of the Navy, and Lee would like, his wife would talk him into going to the Sunday matinee at the theater, and I'd go down there and tend bar, and that's when I first met Bill. And he came in from Ohio, and we was working for Fred Egan. Well, he's working for pretty good people, but I can't think of that veterinarian's name out there, but he learned a lot working for him, and then he went to work for Frank Ervin, and he was with him for quite a while. And he was a hard-working son of a gun.
Oh, did Christy rake the whole barn area?
Jesus Christ, yeah, he was, I'm telling you, I don't know how many rakes he probably wore out.
No, I don't either.
And one thing that annoyed him with the overlap coming out of the buckle on the head strap. If you didn't tuck that back under if it was long enough, you didn't have that. You didn't have that thing hanging out. It put it down into the ring where the throat latch went. He had of course, I went go to Lexington with him a couple of times when Lydia wouldn't go. She wanted me to look after Bill. He got the fox in charge of the hen house. So we'd go down there, and of course after the sale at night we'd go into that tally ho, was it, or something like that, and you'd be sitting there yakking with, cause he was always seeing horsemen, and it was a goodwill thing for him. He more or less had to do it. But God damn it, the next morning it was part of me. The next morning we woke up, and one thing about Bill, the old farmer, he had to have a breakfast, a good breakfast. I couldn't even look at an egg. We were both hungover. So anyway, he'd order pancakes and bacon, and I'd smell that, and I'd go, ooh. So I could get a cup of coffee down, and he says, look, he'd be dressed up in his sport coat, necktie, and all that. He says, I don't want to go to the sales ring yet. Let's take a little ride. I said, okay, where do you want to go? He said, let's go to the tobacco market. Cold, damp, Jesus, everybody was sneezing and had the strangles and the snots. So as we're going over there, we're passing this big building. And I said, what's that? He says, oh, that's the Lexington Hospital. He was driving. And he says, there ain't a son of a bitch in that place, and he's thicker than I am right now. And he'd stay over there for a while, and then we'd go back to popping a breath mint now and then and get back in his routine. Hi there, take the hat off and shaking hands. Yeah. And he put on a good show, didn't he?
He was a fine man.
Yes, he was. He suffered a lot near the end. He had a prostate that never really corrected itself, and he had a pacemaker. And he had a few other things done. I was with him a week before he died, and in fact, he had his last martini with me. I have a picture of it at home, because that's what we used to drink when we got together. And his daughter Jeannie had these shepherd, what the hell were they? The one crazy sons of bitches running around all the time. The sheep hound dog. She left it with him, and I had gone back to Goshen, Campbell Hall, where I lived. And he was taking the dog out on a leash or something, and wrapped around his legs and pulled him, and he fell down. And at our age, falling down is, it's not like a kid. When you're full, even though it was on the grass, they took him to the hospital, and I think ammonia set in immediately or something. That did it. But he had the shingles too. He suffered with them for several years, and at that point he had some Russian woman getting seeds and giving him all kinds of medications that they did in Russia, I guess. I'll never forget that morning.
That Wellwood girl just come down with the shingles.
We have
Paula or Jane?
Huh?
Paula.
Paula.
Yeah, she was out here a little while ago.
So, what can you tell us about Frank Ervin? Do you gentlemen have some stories you can share with us about him?
Well, he's a great horseman.
Great horseman, great race driver.
Yeah,
He could drive.
and
He was rough, but he could drive.
he could drink too.
Oh yeah, he liked to drink. But he could really drive a horse, and he could. If you ever looked at old horses like them trotting mares and that, they'd be racing in the spring and they'd be racing in the fall.
He raced Adios. He drove Adios
Yeah.
one time, and but they talk about Sep Hale and Jimmy Wingfield. One of his jobs was getting a quart of old Granddad 100 proof to put in his locker, and he'd knock half of that off training horses in the morning.
yeah.
Old Sep. Well, believe me, Ervin wasn't far behind him.
No. No, he drank them a lot more than people thought he did.
They tell him the story about the time they had to take Ervin home and put him to bed. Monty, and that's not a nice story, I
No.
guess. I won't tell that one. It was funny as hell. But, a boy type joke.
No, he was a good horseman and a great race driver. He could really drive his horse.
Yeah, He was. He,
Nobody outdrove him. I don't know they outtrained him either.
Yeah,
No.
some good horses.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah, he did.
every year.
And trotters and paces.
Yeah.
Right.
He didn't, my father and he were pretty friendly. At one time, they were pretty close. But,
Harry, what can you tell us about the Garys?
the Garys? Is that turned on? Well, I can probably tell you more when it's turned off. Old man Gary, he more or less took charge at the stable. Ebby Sr. We had a nickname for him later on, which I hesitate to mention. But anyway, he more or less displaced a lot of some of our opinions. And Mrs. Harriman, she used to be around a lot, you know, and she had a wonderful pair of hands. She could drive like a professional every time. And old man Gary, he was used to jerking those polo ponies around. And he was rough as hell in those matinees. And he was always on a break or something like that. 'Cause they had several of those amateur trots at the Goshen half-mile track. And but after the war, he more or less took over. Mr. Harriman wasn't getting around as much, and neither was she. But I'm trying to think what I can tell you about, you know, old man Gary. Other than that, I always thought he was like a surrogate son to Mr. Harriman. Mr. Harriman had a son that died real young. His name was Roland. Then he had the two daughters. I trained horses for Phyllis, not Phyllis, but Betty, Elizabeth, later years. And she had a good pair of hands. But Mrs. Harriman was a wonderful woman. And they had special lines made for her, because the old leather lines, you know, the web lines,
Yeah.
you know, they were about almost an inch wide, the hand holders, and the hooves were cut down to about 3/4. And I had a pair of the hand holders, you know, they used to she had to use. But she held a track record at the Goshen mile track unofficially. I think she went and was 58 and maybe a little bit better with Highland Scott. He was a free-legged pacer. And later on she drove Tassel Hanover, her last mile at the Goshen half-mile track. But getting back to the Garys, young Ebby, he was, he loved horses, and he'd come around every summer and maybe spend a few days or a week living with my parents on the farm. I was in the Navy at that time, and he loved it, going down to the barn, and all the grooms made a fuss over him. And he was just a nice, quiet kid. He's very quiet. He'd get in the store with a rub rag and be wiping a horse down, and, you know, everybody said how much he liked, you know, loved the horse. And then Peter came along. And that was after the, you know, after the war. And Mr. Harriman's sister, you know, they had to raise thoroughbreds up in Delhi, New York, at Ackerman stud up there. And they bred a horse called Young Peter, that was named after Peter Gary. And there was in a famous race up in Saratoga where a horse alongside of him savaged him by grabbing him by the ear. They were in a neck and neck duel. You ever hear about that at Saratoga? I can't recall the other horse's name, but I talked to Peter on the phone maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. And I remember the first year that the gang came, there was Peter, and then there was, what did we used to call her? The girl.
Dee Dee.
She's
Dee Dee.
Dee Dee, yeah. They'd come down, and Harold Miller, you didn't know him, and he was, the only time he was happy when somebody else was having bad luck. That put a smile on his face. He was, even, you know, Peter called him cement face. They were holding a horse for him to get ready, and Harold says, come on. Peter was hustling up to get in the cart, and whether the horse moved or what, I was standing right there, and he put his foot right through the apron. Holy Jesus! Harold just felt cracked. Yeah, can't you get? So he lit into Peter a little bit. Later on, I saw Peter talking to his father, and he was saying, "Gee, that Mr. Miller, he's rather harsh." And old Evie said, well, he says, you gotta learn the right way. But that was Peter's, later on they became pretty good friends, and Harold became his mentor, so to speak, you know, making sure the harness and everything was safe, and the sulky and all that. And Peter got more enjoyment out of the stable, I think, than any of them, because he did more driving. Evie used to come up to Monticello and drive in overnight. Young Ebby, you know, but young Ebby was number one, and Peter was number two, you might say. But,
The rest of these two old guys won't be able to get up if you wait much longer.
longer than anybody down here, and I knew him when he was rich, and I knew him when he wasn't so rich.
Yeah.
And I could never tell the difference with he or Ada. They've been the same people right along, and it's been a pleasure knowing him.
Thank you, Harry.
He's a good
Thank you,
horseman, one of the best, most respected.
You'll have to get up by yourself, because I can't.
Well, for Christ's sake, if I can't depend on you for anything.
You can't depend on me for much, I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
Yeah. Thank you.
She was helping me get up the other day, and we both went down.
Yeah, you should have seen
That's
that.
happened to me,
Went
too.
out to
Well,
look at his crepe myrtle trees.
take care, buddy.
He
Okay.
decided they needed water, and I didn't think, he went over to get the hose, and when he finished, he just went,
At
And this-
first,
yeah. So I tried to get him up, and then I slipped on this pine straw, is the worst stuff they got down. That's
It's
just like
slippery.
walking on ice. And I landed, so here we are, two 80-some-year-old people laying out there in a heap.